My name is Tommy, and I'm a proctologist.
Honey, you're not a doctor.
You're right, dear. I'm a craftsman. Ah, there we go, that's better. Had the wrong uniform on. Like I was saying, my name is Tommy, and I'm a craftsman. Today I'm going to try to talk about my kitchen countertop. Custom made concrete with Seaglass. Oh, the glass selection. Let me tell you about the glass. There's all types of different glass out there, but for this type of project you want plate glass, not the chunky stuff. Flat plate glass. The flatter the better. Me and Amy were able to find a lot of plate glass for sale, already broken up into 1-inch chunks, or roughly 1-inch chunks, for sale by the pound. It's important to check your plate glass when you do get it to make sure that it's not just painted glass. If it is just painted glass, then that paint could come off in the process of making your countertop. So if you're going to go with colored glass, make sure it's actually colored glass, not just painted, and use plate glass.
Hey, how you doing? This top is going to be wild, but I really want to teach you so you don't end up in trouble about the difference in glass. A lot of time customers would bring me their own glass and it looks beautiful, what I call chunk glass. But you got to remember, with concrete, it's only going to show like the tip of the iceberg. You're going to learn the difference between chunk glass, which looks beautiful in the mold, but concrete covers it. Plate glass, which Amy and Tommy picked, thank God, and curved glass, just the different effect. You always got a picture, you're only going to see the tip of the iceberg. The plate glass will show bigger pieces. Alright? Keep watching this video, you're going to learn a lot in this one. Me and Tommy are going to show you a little bit about glass placement, what sinks to choose, and the template to mold building process. Stick around. Now let's really talk about sinks. Just because you can fabricate them, you need to let your customer know the 3 most common styles so you don't get in some trouble. Now basically there's 3 styles of sinks. So when the customer wants an undermount sink, you need to ask them what style, because some are harder than others to do. They take a little more time. Sketch something on a white piece of paper with a magic marker just to fully explain the difference so you don't get in trouble, okay? Here's a list of template supplies I think you'll need to get you on your way to get an accurate template, whether it's new cabinets just installed where there's no countertop there at all, or an existing countertop where the customer feels they like their cabinets and they're going to keep them. Bring some 3-inch strips of either 1/4-inch Luan. We like to use Coroplast, but you might not have access to a sign manufacturing facility where they could sell you sheets of it to cut it into 3-inch strips. If not, just go to a big box hardware store and buy 1/4-inch Luan. Okay, make sure you bring levels and check the cabinets. I like to bring a 2-foot level, a 4-foot level, and an 8-foot level just to see, depending on the bank of cabinets, how long they are. I like to have a longer level there. If you have any further questions about supplies, let me know in the comments and we'll respond shortly. I just want to make sure you are better informed after watching this video than you were before you watched it. But we got a lot of ground to cover. So I do insist with customers to template their projects. Walls are out. Even in new construction, even if they do end up being perfectly square, the template will at least confirm that, so you ain't biting your fingernails off while you're fabricating, wondering, is this gonna fit? Am I gonna have a gap? Am I gonna have to use a lot of caulk to hide that corner that's out? If you build a top based on measurements only, or just from blueprints, it's very, very risky. If it's not concrete, it's still so much easier to just template, lay it on a slab of granite, marble, quartz, or other slabs that are out there, and then cut to fit. At least you know once you're done cutting it, it's going to fit exactly, provided it matches the template. With concrete, you just lay it on the melamine mold and wrap your concrete mold rails around it. Tommy's going to show you that shortly in this video. Now, there are cases where you might feel, I don't need to template. It's a peninsula. It's just where the short end butts up against the wall, and some installers might scribe it to fit. But that's still a pain. You make dust in the customer's house or outside. You got extra work. Just template. It's so simple. And then after you template it, you can actually have the customer with a Sharpie, the same Sharpie you're using, sign the template. No dust in the house. You take that template back, you lay it on a slab, then you know it's gonna work. You don't have to bite your fingernails off worrying if it's gonna fit. It's just that simple. I can't believe people do projects working with very premiumly priced materials and do not template. But you now know it's that simple.
One of the very first things that we had to do in creating this masterpiece was to lay out a template. And the templating process is very, very important. Probably one of the most important steps in creating something like this. So you definitely want to take your time in doing so and take a few extra steps to ensure your success. The very first thing we had to do is figure out where to start with the template. In this case, we're going to start in the corner. Now, when I say corner, it sounds like the corner is going to be square. But in my case, and in most cases that I've discovered, the corner is not square, which is why it's very important to make a template. That's going to tell you how out of square your corner really is, and it'll make the product fit better into the corner once you've made it. Now, the next step in creating the template is hot glue. Now, I can tell you not to burn yourself and to be careful, but you're probably going to burn yourself. I did, and that's how I learned not to burn myself. If you do get hot glue on yourself, it's important not to panic. Stop, let it cool, and then remove it after it's dry. If you panic, and you go squishy squishy, you can get it all over the place and you have more than one burn. Very important, use safety when you're using hot glue. When using hot glue, don't be shy with it. Use enough glue to ensure that your template pieces are going to stay together. Now in our case, we already had the cabinets to template on, and we decided that we were going to go with 1.5 inch overhang. You can go 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. We wanted to go a little bit bigger, so we went with 1.5 inch overhang. Make a lot of notes. Use a lot of glue because you don't want it to fall apart, and make a lot of notes because you're going to be moving this template out of where it's at. And this might be the only time that you have where the template is in place where you're going to be making it. So note where the wall is at, note where the front is at. It'd be difficult to have too many notes.
Now that we have Tommy and Amy's kitchen layout, me and Tommy are going to figure out how much concrete we need and mold making materials. Now, a one bag kit at 1.25 inches thick countertop, or what most people call 3cm, will give you about 4 square feet and some change. Amy and Tommy's kitchen is 38 square feet. So 38 square feet divided by 4 square feet, say 9.5, but just by 10 just to be it safe. But what really worries me is that Amy was hoping we can get this in without having a seam in the 105-inch left side sink top. And their condo is also on the 2nd floor. But wait, there's more. They also want an undermount sink reveal with glass around the edges, a sink reveal. Now, concrete weighs about 12 to 15 pounds a square foot, so that piece, which is 22 square feet, somewhere falls in the range of 300 pounds. Back in my brown hair days, I've encountered quite a bit of no-seam customers. Just outright adamant about not having a seam in their countertop. But before I agree to make them happy, after finding out they live in a high-rise condo, I have to measure the elevator to see if it fits. I also start thinking, as I'm making it, after I make it, the fragility of the countertop now that it has an undermount sinkhole in the top. And even if I decide to rod the sink, I still do not want it to break, crack, chip, ding, or anything. I then suggest to them, maybe you have to remove the banisters. Maybe you have to rent a crane and an operator. And if you do rent a crane and an operator, make sure you get a liability disclaimer with the customer just to protect us. And you know, if they see how seams are really supposed to be done, they probably wouldn't pay the extra fee north of $2,000. So, being as you want to run a business, I suggest don't just have samples, but make actual seam mock-ups of the materials that you're willing to offer to your customers. I'll be posting a full-depth video called Sinks and Seams within the next month that can save you problems, whether you're just a fabricator, owner, or both. But I don't want to hijack this video, because me and Tommy got a lot of work to do.
As I was saying, it's important to be as accurate as possible when making the template. Now in this case, we decided to use the template to make a mock-up of the countertop on the largest side to calculate whether or not our countertop and how much difficulty we were going to have getting our countertop into my condo. I live on the 2nd floor and I have a wraparound stairwell. So after we got the template made and we made a mock-up using some wood, and we brought the template back and tried to bring it up the stairs, we calculated that we would have a 70% failure rate if we were to try to bring this countertop up in one piece in the way that we wanted to manufacture it without a seam. So in this case, if we didn't have a template, it would have been very difficult for us to calculate that and to get a good representation of whether or not, even after we measured the stairwells, we measured the countertops, and all of our measurements gave us about a 50% chance.
Love Amy and Tommy. They're not just friends to me, they family. But before I say yes and end up over-promising and undelivering without checking, me and Tommy decided to make a mock-up of this 105-inch long sink top in question. We also are keeping in mind this top will be 300 pounds and have a sinkhole in it. Not to mention all the beautiful work Tommy did creating this customized Seaglass Crete top just to make his wife smile really big. Keeping that in mind.
But once we got the actual template with the wood attached and a real representation of the countertop that we were bringing up, that failure rate jumped up to 70%. And it's a good thing that we did decide to go with the seam in the way that we did, because honestly it would not have made it up here in one piece. Keeping that in mind, we determined that there was a 70% chance of failure, and we would need to do a seam in this case. Now, another reason why it's so important to make a very strong template, use lots of glue, make lots of notes, is because in my case, we're going to be making our countertop upside down. And the notes and the form were going to be very important in doing so. Now, when we go to make our mold, we do prefer to use melamine. It is a very smooth material. It's easy to cut, it's inexpensive, it has a lot of advantages for mold making. In this particular case, our mold was needed to be a little bit longer than what a standard sheet of melamine was. So we had to extend our piece, so we had to create a seam in a spot and figure out what was going to be the easiest place to create that seam in the mold so that it wouldn't interfere with the finished product or leave any sort of marks that we wouldn't be able to remove easily. We also decided to use the plate glass and organize it in such a way that it would cover any marks that may be left from the seam. So that gave us an advantage as well. When you're making your mold, it's very important to make a strong mold and an accurate mold. You don't want your mold to be too big because you may be wasting material or having to grind off a bunch of extra stuff afterwards. And you certainly don't want it to be too small because you can't really stretch it afterwards. So it needs to fit the template exactly, or as close to exact as possible, and be strong. I can't emphasize making a strong mold quite enough. When we calculated how much concrete we would be putting into our mold, I think we came up with roughly 300 or 330 pounds. It was 330 minus the sink cutoff, 300 pounds of concrete that was going to be going into this mold. So it needs to be very strong. So we use a pre-drilling countersink. We take our rails and clamp them in place so that they don't move while we have our template in the mold. I pre-drill and countersink the screws in each one of the holes, one about every 12 inches, starting 2 inches over from the corner. You don't want to be too close to the corner because it'll blow out, so you need to come at least an inch, 2 inches in from the corner, and then one every foot at least. It's important that you go flush or just below the surface so that we can tape off. We run painter's tape over the top of the rails afterwards to keep any concrete from getting into the screw heads. So then it'll be easier when we go to demold to remove that. When we are preparing our rails, make sure that they're cut straight and smooth because they do have to create a watertight surface. So we want them to be flat and smooth. When we screw them down, make sure that the edge of the rail comes in direct contact with the base and that they are lined up squarely. Afterwards, we do run a bead of silicone around on the inside just to ensure that there's a little extra strength and that nothing's going to be running out underneath the rails.
Now it is time to do a sink mold. Granite guys, quartz guys, you might love this thinking you don't have to cut out the hard surface, but making the mold precise because it's an undermount reveal. It's not like we could do a top mount sink in it, then I would probably just cut it on site. But you still gotta build a precise mold. That could be just as time consuming. Now if it didn't have glass in it, maybe we can grind it, shape it, but that's not how it is. So I made the mold out of some dense foam. And because there's glass going all around it, you can't just have glass on the deck and then not on the edge. It'll look half-assed. So I made the mold, I watered down some drywall mud and skimmed the edge, sanded it smooth, but I made sure I was cutting it precise because you can't have it on an angle. It has to be a perfect 90 degrees. So that's why I spent a little time on the mold. And then that's all you have to do. Use the template, cut your mold. Don't try to cut it with a razor knife because you know you're not going to cut it 90. Send it to a saw, treat it like a thick piece of wood. Okay? Check it out. This job is fun. Now, while you're waiting for your master template edges to dry, throw anything in the sink center area just so you don't put glass in that area. Don't mark it with a pencil because you don't want to put pencil marks on the mold. Just throw anything there, a piece of wood, just so when you're doing the glass placement process, you won't end up putting glass where the sink cutout goes. And then when your master sink cutout is dry, attach it, tack it up with a little bit of silicone drops, and then seal it just like you did the mold rails. Woo! We're gonna have some fun. Now, if you're trying this for the first time for a customer, even though they pick out the glass, it's a good idea to lay it in the mold and take some pictures, basically confirmation approval, make sure they want a little more blue, maybe they want a little more clear or white. It's always good to just take the time. Just because they picked blue and white glass, don't just throw it in and pour concrete over it. This way there's no surprises when you come to deliver and install, or they pick it up, however you choose to do your business. But just do that. So Tommy decided to do that with his wife, which is very, very smart.
Okay. Alright, so This is the sample section. So that's kind of like what the other one, that's not the blue one that you wanted, but this is just a random spattering of the glass in the different various sizes. We had to take some of the bigger chunks out, and there were...
Like a shiny spot maybe anyway, so we don't
Well,
need to use
when you look at this one, there's white glass mixed in with this.
That's pretty. So here's your artistic, because I like that.
And this one has the seashells in it with a little bit of white glass crumbs to break it up and accentuate the color.
I like it.
So that would spread this out a little bit more, and it wouldn't be as busy if we do some...
So
Great, that's a good idea.
So let's say 80% color and maybe a ratio of 20% clear and shells all mixed up.
Yeah, 80% color, 20%.
Because the color is what you love.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. All right, we'll take it from here.
Perfect. Thank you guys.
You're welcome. Love you. And have a shop vac handy. You definitely need to clean your mold after each time you drill holes. Each time there's dust, if you are working on your mold and you go away and you come back, vacuum the mold. Your mold needs to be clean. Any dirt that's in your mold will be in your countertop afterwards, so keep it clean. Now, when I got my glass, it did come in a lot of different sizes, and there was a lot of glass dust in the bag with it. So I actually had to go through the process of sorting out the glass and getting just the pieces that I wanted. I think we ended up with about 40 or 60, somewhere around 40 or 60 pounds of glass in this countertop. In the process of laying out the glass pieces, as far as on the base, we laid out the glass, and I wanted to use as much of a random pattern as possible. So I took my glass and I just distributed it and tossed it about until it was evenly, and I did it one color at a time. I tossed one color on top of each other color. And then I had to go through the process of moving each piece just a little bit to get the proper spacing. You don't want pieces butting right up against each other in the mold. You want to have them spaced a little bit apart so that the concrete can run between them, and that's what's really going to hold everything together and hold those pieces in place. So glass selection is important. If it's nice flat plate glass, this process will be a lot easier. If you've got chunks of glass that's going to be rolling around and moving all over the place, it may be very difficult.
Yeah, if you were wondering how to stick the glass on the edges and around the sink template mold we just made, just get out a glue stick. You gotta have patience. You gotta have patience to make something badass. And you'll see Tommy, that's what he's doing. Back in my brown hair days, I've done this when people didn't want a full terrazzo-y looking top. They wanted like a glass and shell trail going through the sink. That's what I did. So I don't know what any secrets you had. This is just what I do. I'm just trying to help you out. I want you to be badass at your craft. That's all. Okay, I'm having too much fun with this. This is too much fun. This job, I'm so freaking excited. That's all.
So, now that I've got all my glass in place, my screw heads are taped off, my mold is ready to accept some concrete, there's just a few things left to make sure of. Now, before you get going on this concrete, once you start, you're not going to be able to stop. So make sure you use the restroom before you start mixing. Wear safety glasses. In this case, we're also wearing gloves. I recommend that you wear some very good fitting gloves. Maybe use a rubber band or some kind of tape around the wrist to keep the concrete from getting into the gloves. That was one of the problems that you might see me having further along in the video when we're drizzling the concrete. I kept getting concrete in the gloves. It's like, oh gosh, it's killing me. So make sure your gloves fit good and try to get them in a way that the concrete's not going to get in your gloves while you're mixing. This is a very messy process. Whatever clothes you're wearing are going to get concrete on them. Wear a face mask so that dust you're not breathing all of that dust. Be as safe as possible. Try to use good lifting techniques.
Yay, time to mix. Let's do this. I'm so happy about this. Woohoo! Finally, Tommy spent all that time putting glass around the edges. He also wrapped it around the sink reveal so the glass would be on the inside of the undermount sink. Oh, I'm so happy. Okay, pay attention. When you got your 5-gallon bucket and you got your modifier, okay, shake it up as long as you can. Pour in only half of this gallon. Then take the other half and shake the shizzle out of it. Hit the bottom because sediment stays on the bottom and you want that into your powder. Gotta be in there. Mix it up as good as you can. Pour it in, then get your color pack. We used white. Put it in. Guess what you do? Mix it up again. Mix it up. Mix the liquid first. Don't pour your color pack that it mixes with the powder. You might not have a good color. Put it in the modifier. Mix that. Get that olive and white. Then pour your concrete in. Pour a little in at a time. Don't go crazy and throw the whole bag in. You're going to put too much torque on your mixer. And even if your mixer doesn't burn out, you might not get a good mix. Pour a little bit of crete at a time. When I say a little bit, cut the whole bag up into 3 parts. Boom, boom, boom. Okay? Then you do it. Then, with this spatch, add some water. Okay? Just that 16 ounce of water. Don't get too crazy with water because water evaporates and you're going to have a lot of pits. Then, it's a drizzle mix. And that's when the fun is. That's it. It's that simple.
And when we're getting ready to mix, we had, I think, 10 bags, 10 kits total of the concrete, the juice, and the color to mix. I think we calculated we're going to need just over 9, and we're going to have a little bit extra for mixing for the seam and whatever other touch-up stuff that might come down the line. It's not going to hurt you to have an extra kit. So for us, we had, I think, 4 buckets or 5 buckets set aside, and we were going to rotate while we're mixing. In hindsight, we thought it might have been nice to have 10 buckets. Have as many buckets as you might need and pre-mix. Once you start running this concrete, mixing it and pouring it, you have to keep it steadily going. So you don't have time to be floundering in between mixing buckets. It's more important to get the concrete mixed and into the mold as close of a time as possible. So any time that you spend between your sets trying to clean and prep one bucket to the next is going to diminish your quality. So again, once you start, you can't stop. You gotta keep it running. So like I was saying, to have as many buckets as you might need for each bag of concrete. So that way you can pre-mix your juice with your color, and then all you have to do is add the concrete, have them already cut and ready to go, add your concrete and hit it with the mixer. It takes 3 to 5 minutes to get the bucket completely mixed, and while I'm mixing, you'll probably see Gene pouring, and we're drizzling and doing all this other stuff. So it moves very, very fast. I think we did 10 buckets in an hour and a half or something like that, maybe even less than that. Probably should have been faster than that. Anyway, as I'm mixing, you may see me kicking the buckets on the side, moving it around, and that's very important because you don't want any dry pockets in your mix. So very important to be as fast as possible, keep that mixer moving, get all the powders off the insides. I kick the bucket and that causes the powder to shift back into the rest of the mix. So it's hard to get in the corner sometimes, and so kicking the bucket definitely helps. Again, make sure before you start that you have all your proper safety equipment. So you use the restroom because you're not going to be taking any breaks during this process. And be ready to spend the next hour, hour and a half mixing concrete.
Now look, if you do this, I want you to practice. I just want you to be so good at your craft. But before you sell a countertop, make a sample. A little 12 by 12. You can keep it in your car or your truck. Just keep it with you. You never know when you meet a potential customer. Customers aren't a place to go to. You just might run into somebody. And if you show them that, you're going to be doing good. But practice, because if you can make a sample, you can make a table. You might need a little more practice if you want to mess around with sinks. Okay? I'm here to help. Tommy's here to help. You can do it. Alright? What do you got to lose? Make a table. Make a coffee table. Get that confidence. And then look at it and say, I'm a badass. I could do concrete with Seaglass in it. I could put seashells in it. I want the best for you. The trade industry needs you. We want you. Do it. Even if you want to go do what you gotta do and work at a job on your side hustle on Saturdays, make a concrete table for your kitchen. The ideas are endless. Stay tuned. Keep watching. You are gonna learn a lot. Okay? Okay, now that Tommy is done, doing the final drizzling, he's literally like sprinkling concrete, and it's actually locking the glass where he placed it. Because if you were to just pour first, it'll just part, and then when you demold it, you'll see like a round spot of just concrete and all the glass around it. If that's the design, hey, not for Amy though. Oh, no. We're not doing that. So he's drizzling it to literally lock the glass where he placed it. Okay? And that way, because we didn't want to glue every little piece. So now we're still patting it, but we're not like, pounding on it. We're just tapping it. You gotta be gentle. Okay, then once you know the drizzle layer is covered, then we will pour. But we're not going to dump still. We're going to pour a little at a time, and this will start putting some weight on the drizzle layer and getting some more concrete down in there to fit around that, as Tommy explained to you earlier. Then I'm going to pat it. Then I'm going to pour it in spots. So you figure how much it weighs. If you were to pour a full 5-gallon bucket in one spot, I don't like to gamble. And knowing that all that weight in one spot, I kind of think it could part. It could be, I don't know. But I'd rather not take the chance. I don't like to gamble, especially with Amy's countertop. Okay? So if something is like there's over 30% chance and I start getting into a risk layer, I'm not doing it. I ain't doing it at all. At all. So when me and Tommy was talking to you about, we thought that would crack at 70%. I wasn't doing it once we crossed over 30. Now when we tried it with the mock-up, if it would have went down, we might have tried it. But no way. Can you imagine breaking that top after all this work you're watching and redoing it? It ain't like I could go buy another slab of granite or quartz and recut it. No. Oh, the mold, the glass, no. We hit over 30%. Anyway, now that I'm pouring it, I'm actually patting it down a little harder, getting it all around the sink. And then when you see like maybe spots that could use a little more concrete, we worry about over there and get it all nice and level, pat it out. Don't just keep pouring it, because then it's all going to flow over sides. That's why we taped the edges. We didn't want concrete in the screws, because when you got to demold it, also, it's not just to protect the screw heads. You know, melamine is literally particle board, and the wetness could swell it up and distort your edge, and then you might have a lot more sanding issues. Just tape the edges, all right? Just do it. And when you're getting to the final stages after you poured and it's all leveled to the 3 cm or 1.25" thickness, do not stick your fingers in there trying to touch the glass and mix the top layer with the bottom. Just stay away from that. Just keep your fingers away from it. All I want you to do is smooth. Then, just like you see many concrete people do when they want to level it, they usually grab a 2x4 and level it out. We did that with a straight edge. And as you can see, and then I'm getting excess, because even if you pour a lot of concrete, you'll see, because it's mixed like mashed potato type consistency, you don't want to hump on the bottom of your deck. Yes, you can grind it out, but who wants to do that? We're here to make some money, get stuff done. Okay? Get it done. And again, we need you so bad in the trade industry. Okay? We need you. I want you to be a badass craft. We're here to help. That's all.
Now, if you are going to try this sort of a glass process, as you can see for the very first batch that we ran through of the concrete, we were drizzling it. And I mentioned drizzling earlier and why it's important to wear good fitting gloves, because we were grabbing handfuls of the concrete and patting it down in place. The reason we did this is because we didn't want to just pour the concrete, because the weight of the concrete, and if it's flowing too fast, could push some of the glass pieces out of their position. And we wanted them to stay where they were at as much as possible. Even though it seems very random, I spent a lot of time putting that glass where I wanted it. I wanted to make sure that it stayed looking the way that we made it. So we took our time drizzling the concrete on the first layer until all the glass was completely covered, and then we poured in from there. Now, as we're putting in the glass, drizzling it, making sure that it's completely covered up. And then when we get a little heavier and we start putting more of the concrete on there, we also go through and we pat it down with our hands. And what that does is it helps to push down and release any of the air pockets. It pushes the concrete into the glass and releases all the small little air particles from around the glass. Now, when we demolded and we flipped the countertop over, we could see a few places where there were air pockets around the glass. That's why it's important to have a little bit of extra material from your kit. If you got the concrete, the color, and all the same materials, you can make the same color and fill that in very easily. Also, having that extra material is going to be important when it comes to making the seam. And now it's time to demold. This process may take a little time. It's important to not rush it. In our case, we decided to take the sides off of the mold first and let it air out for 24 to 48 hours before we started to demold across the face. And again, do not rush this process.
Don't freak out if you see a bunch of pits and places you need to fill. Do not try to fill it with caulk. One mistake that's very glaring to me is when me and Tommy were figuring out how much concrete we need, 38 square feet divided by 4 is 9.5. And I told you buy 10. Well, of course you gotta buy 10. No one sells half bags that I know of yet. But I should have told you to buy one extra in case something happens. You might kick over a bucket of premix during the rush when we had a drizzle. So buy an extra bag. I have some bags lying around for when I need to make samples. I need to have them like ready to go. But anyway, you gotta know your math, especially division. Take your kit. Break it down. I'm going to show you here. I got a whole bag and I do it when I'm making sample. I don't waste a whole bag. So I'm going to show you. But the real important thing is you got to get a scale and you got to get a spaghetti strainer. So I don't want to get in no trouble of any of you guys or girls running in the kitchen, taking the strainer and ruining it. Okay? Buy one. Hang it up in your shop. I shake out the fibers. That's what you do. When you shake it out, it's going to rise to the top. And then I save them for other projects. Sometimes I feel a little more better in my brain if I really reinforce around certain areas, curves. If you look at, my website, you might see I work with all different materials. Ebonite, terrazzo, paper stone, natural stones, a lot of epoxy. So I do a lot of different things. That's why I happen to save my fibers, okay? GFRC is not the $3 a bag stuff in big box stores. It usually runs you about $75 to $100 a kit. So just buy an extra one. You'll need it.
it's time to demold. This process may take a little time. It's important to not rush it. Again, do not rush this process. I'm starting at the corner and moving our way around. And I think I went around 2 or 3 times before it had completely lifted off the face. Now I know you're excited to see the face, but it's important to not rush this process. Take as many safety measures as you possibly can. In our case, we almost flipped it too far. We didn't have a side rail and it started to scoot. It's important that if something like that happens, don't panic, okay? Stop where you're at until you regain and figure out exactly what you need to do. When you are lifting, make sure you lift with your legs, not with your back. Use proper lifting measures. Be safe. Go slow. Put things in place that are going to help you so it doesn't slide off the table. After we figured that, when we went to lower it back down, we put a rail on the back side so that if it did slide, it would slide into the rail and the rail would catch it. So little things like that, try to see before you leap.
Okay, remember I told you when we skimmed that mashed potato consistency over the edge when we demolded it? Let that dry 8 hours, and I just told you knock it down with black carbide paper. Now I want you to like clean it up and expose the glass. Don't worry about polishing the glass to see the prettiness yet. We're just trying to get the concrete off so you have a straight edge to either run your grinder, because we're doing a little small round over, not too crazy, not like a semi bullnose or Roman OG, but I'm showing you with minimal tools. You can have your grinder, even put like 100 on it, but make sure it's a flat pad, a hard pad that don't bend. So when you're grinding off the concrete, you at least know it's straight. Even if you're if you're new and you have a little dip, when you're polishing the glass with a hard pad, if you see one of the glass pieces are a little dull, that means you might not be hitting over it. It's kind of really in. If you were to use like a soft pad because the store didn't have a hard pad, don't just say, oh, well, they didn't have one. Do what you gotta do and find a hard flat pad. This thing will follow every curve. You don't do that. I wouldn't even use it for the round over, and I'll tell you why. This is good for inside corners, around the sink, so when you're getting to that corner, this doesn't hit the side. It'll kind of bend. Probably can't see it, but it does bend, okay? Soft and hard pads. You'll learn about that if you keep watching. But if you don't keep watching, at least remember that, please, because you want it perfect. But we're just knocking off it so it's flat, so we could either run our grinder and then put this on it. If you wanted that big, just, click it off. Come on, get off of there. And you could click on, put that on your grinder and find them, and then that was a little heavier than we wanted. But I've done this. If you watch my other videos, I did a spill pullover in concrete. I forget when, but I showed you. I put it on, and don't, especially when you have glass on the edge or actually in the concrete, don't just try to cut this all out at once. Take your time. Woosah, woosah. Just cut it slow. You don't want to chunk that glass out. You just want to keep grinding it slowly till you fit in. And then, okay? That's how you do that. Or, you don't have a grinder, you have a, woodworker router, a 1.5 horsepower, 3 horsepower. I'm a fanatic about my tools, so I'm not using even my Porter cables. I will not use my Festool router to be grinding concrete. I know I could blow it out. I know all that. I know Festool will probably call me and tell me, yes, you can. I'm not doing it. I treat them like gold. But I do go to big box stores, and if I see like a $59 router, just something to spin this, because all I'm trying to do, you put this in there, you keep watching, I'll show you. I made like a OG, which this is a round over, but if I lower it a bit, it can give you an OG edge, and I'll show you that. And you can literally grind concrete to knock it down. I don't just profile an edge in concrete, granite, marble, quartz, vitrazo, and then just leave it. I still have to, I like when a customer rubs their hand along the edge and they don't feel any bumps or ripples. So that's why even after I profile my edge, I always grind it. And you'll see me, I almost touch the deck and then I touch the edge. Touch the deck, almost touch the edge. And you'll see I think I'm doing a piece of quartz because I didn't film me doing this top. But I want you to know. I want you to be a better you. That is all. Okay? So keep that in mind. You're just gonna router an edge all around where you wanna, okay? And then you're gonna start with the process. Follow the directions. 50 grit you might not need on this one. I mean, I didn't. Know why? Because we did this glass process where the glass is like right there. That's why I don't want you to start out with a rough grit. Always start with like 200 grit, even if you're working with solid surface. Corian guys, got a little scratch? Don't quick take 80 grit and try to sand it out. You might have been able to get it out with 220 grit. So start, and if you see it, and if that doesn't work and you see it starting to shine, lower your grit process. Or if you're using micron, higher it. We'll teach you that in the other Avenite videos. But for right now, all I want you to know is profile the edge with either the woodworker thing, but go buy a cheap router, or your grinder. Then process it. Okay? If you're using a router to round over the top, doesn't matter whether you use one or not, very important that you follow that curve with your grinder, whether you're using wet or dry sanding pads. Order a soft and a hard backer pad. I used a hard pad just for rounding the edge so everything's flat and square. The soft one I use for inside sinks where I'm approaching the curve. Then I want you to get either dry pads or wet pads. There is a difference. So the 50 grit, this one you're probably not going to need on this one because we use plate glass and use a cool trick. Then you're going to use 100, 200, 400. Okay? Make sure you order, when you're ordering them, to tell the people you need dry pads or wet pads. I don't know which kind of machine you're using, so very specific, okay? As a matter of preference, I don't use my wet machine when sanding products with glass in it, like Vitraza or the concrete with glass in it. Because as I'm polishing the glass, if it stays wet, it looks shiny, polished, it looks perfect. And then when it dries, you're like, I see a bunch of scratches. And I'm very particular about getting the scratches out of the glass. And it's very hard to do if it's constantly wet. So that's why I use dry pads. But by all means, the choice is yours. That's just for me. Maybe I can't see. I need these glasses now. I got older. I don't know. But being as I got to use it with 4 grits, I would hate to think I'm done with my 100 grit or 200 grit, and then when I get to the 400 and it dries and I see like 200 scratches. Because as you're practicing, you better be practicing because I told you to. I hope you are. You might be like, now I got to go back. And then if you wet it again, it's just confusing. So I'm able to see it with my dry. Now, if you want to wet just 400, that's probably going to work because you'll know by then that's it. But for me, I prefer when polishing glass dry. Some might oppose that. That's fine. You do you. But I'm just explaining what I do. This is my experience. Okay? Just trying to help you. Alright? Rock and roll. I want to see your projects though soon. Okay? Share them with me. You got my email or website. Let me know. Say, yo, check it out. I tried this. I did it. Let me know. Let me know in the comments. Now, this process you might not need, but we had a little bit of bigger than a pinhole around the glass, so that's why we used the slurry. It's the only reason I'm telling this. It's up to you, but I also, just in case you did have bigger than pinholes, I wanted to show you how to take care of that without freaking out, okay? You got this. Now that I'm happy with the top, I went and got me a porcelain blade. Just because a porcelain blade is thinner than our stone blades, I wanted the thinnest blade possible. And then I rode that blade right up against my straight edge. And I had a nice clean cut with 290 degrees so I could get enough adhesive on both sides. I'll show you that later. Keep watching. You got this. I love doing sink cradles. In some cases, if I was doing Avenite, a solid surface, something where the actual sink has to be attached, I just don't like using mechanical fasteners. I like making sure the sink is in where it's supposed to be and I leave it loose. So when I come with my surface and lay it on top, I can line up the sink perfect. Okay, that's why we do that. We use sink cradles, and especially if you're doing like a 10-unit job, you get more storage if you could stack them up on your A-frame easier than having sinks attached to them in advance. And then there's a lot of maneuvering to get it in with the sink attached to the top. It's just so much easier this way. No offense to those who use mechanical fasteners. I just don't like drilling into my granite, my quartz, or my concrete, especially on a job like this where we literally manufactured the countertops. Okay? Choice is yours. Do your research. This is just how we do it. Okay, now you laid your sink in the cradle. It's all loose, no glue. Don't do anything to it. It's lower than the cabinet by about 1/8 to 1/4 inch. Then I put some cardboard over it, and I had some laminate like glue won't stick to, so I put it under our seam. Okay, then you're gonna mix up this batch as I show you. Pay attention. I showed you like a dark one or a light one. It's just very easy to do. Just bring the kit because you're going to mix this one on site. And make sure you take all the fibers out because this time it has to be an adhesive. You can't fix a seam with concrete. You're going to use an adhesive. I used glue, which most people use for quartz or granite. It actually comes out of a gun. So you'll see that. Okay, I don't like the knife grade because it had to be fully clear. I haven't found a knife grade that doesn't yellow up. I like using glues like, I guess, Integra, some solid surface glue, but experiment. You mix it first before you actually do your seam. Because it's terrible. You spend all this time making sure your tops are clean and white, and then you use a transparent glue and it comes out yellow. So that's very difficult for me. So this is what I did. Use what you want. I'm just telling you what I did, okay? Now bring your lithium densifier. You might find it online called LD1800. Dab around the seam area and the concrete. Don't just do the seam, feather it out so it blends. And then after you let it absorb in there for 15 minutes, go over it with your 200 diamond pad, then your 400 diamond pad. Then let it dry again. And you'll see the seam literally disappeared, but just say it's inconspicuous because it might show up after you apply your sealer. But get it as good as possible. Okay, now that our seam looks good, we pull out the cardboard, the laminate, and we got that little 1/8 to 1/4 inch gap. We're gonna get some silicone in there. We're gonna use 100% silicone like I showed you in the infographics prior to this. Okay, get your acetone ready with a clean white rag because you're wiping that, and keep in mind your concrete is not sealed yet, so you don't want a dirty rag getting dirt into your concrete. Okay, silicone it nice and squeeze it slowly as you're adjusting it, and keep wiping and clean it. Then you're gonna let this sink set 24 hours. You hear what I said? I didn't say overnight, I said 24 hours. A lot of time installers will do this process at 5 o'clock p.m. on the end of the day and then come in 8 o'clock in the morning and then remove it. That's not 24 hours. Got it? Get to know your math. You got to wait to take it off 5 o'clock the next day p.m. 24 hours. 24 hours. Can't say it enough. Not overnight. Get it right. Now that you removed your mounting sink clamps and the 2x4s, you clean it up. You might need a little love around the edges, so just fine tune it. You might not want to use your machine, do it with your hand. Tape the top of that sink reveal. You don't want to scratch that sink. You did all this work putting in an undermount reveal. You don't want to scratch it with your diamond pad, so put some tape right where the seam is and fine tune it till you're happy. Then you're ready for sealer. It's that simple. Tommy and Amy wanted a satin finish, so we used a water base. Tommy spent the time getting that satin finish, and he has sealed it perfect. To me, I don't know about you, but to me, I think he did awesome, mystically fantabulous. If that's a word, it's got to be for what Tommy did. And use a bunch of thin coats. A lot of people, even if you're painting your woodwork, don't try to paint 5 coats in one. It's always better to do it a little at a time, and you will have an immaculate, protected finish. Read the instructions on the sealer you use. This is white concrete. You can get away with a lot of other sealers, but on this one, we used a water-based concrete because it's a white concrete top. Have a great day and check out our other videos. Designicators and Mr. Gene Shop Talk videos are in production right now. I just want you to be better. Tommy wants you to be better. And get out there, and we got a world to build. Woo! Let's go.